Hello, I am Cindy Gross, host of Cindy's Political Corner. I want to thank you for joining us Saturday nights on 6:20 a.m., 1640 a.m., 93.5 FM in the tri-state area, and when you download us internationally through iHeartRadio, Apple and Google Podcast, Spotify, Podbean, out of Israel through Jewish Podcast, the Talkline Radio Network, and through my own website, Cindy's Corners. We have a huge show tonight, so sit back and welcome into my corner. This week, our focus is on headlines in the news. It seems that every day there are so many headlines that we can't get to the middle of a newspaper because the headlines are just so strong and so targeted towards fear and anger and frustration in so many of us. One of our guests is a congressional candidate out of California, a Jewish woman who is one of the leaders in helping Afghans leave the country through secret missions since the summer debacle of the Biden administration. Not an easy task. And if she could take that on, she could take on the craziness going on in California. You're also going to welcome back to our show Grant Stinchfield of Newsmax and syndicated radio host. He made headlines this week when he called for the disbandment of the FBI after their terrible initial reaction that calling the terrorist attack in Texas, his own home state, not targeted to Jews and not an anti-Semitic act. He received a lot of attention for that, and there was a lot of debate, and we're going to discuss it further. And finally, something very personal to my heart. We're going to talk about the upcoming International Holocaust Remembrance Day coming up this Thursday on January 27th. Now, I didn't know much about Holocaust survivors or about the Holocaust because I was fortunate enough. I had grandparents all born here, all college educated. But now I am the daughter of a mother-in-law who is still living and has a remarkable story that she rarely tells about how she survived the camps at Auschwitz. It was by accident that a train she was on was bombed and that she was able to escape and run into a forest that she is here today. Unfortunately, too many are no longer with us. And as anti-Semitism rises and we see acts like happened last week, it is incumbent upon all of us, Jew and non-Jew, to remember the Holocaust accurately, because if we don't, and we suddenly make fact into opinion, it will happen again, and it won't be just to Jews. So joining us tonight is one of the brightest, most outspoken leaders of Yad Vashem Young Leadership, Rachie Shnay. Rachie is also known as a celebrated Jewish activist and jewelry designer and is making headlines with her Mazel collection, making people around the world proud to be Jewish and wear their Jewishness on their bodies in gorgeous accessories. So stay tuned. We have a huge show coming up.
Can you hear the fan that
meeting is being recorded?
Welcome back to this very special episode of Cindy's Political Corner, Headlines in the News. Our first guest is a congressional candidate out of California. And why I want to introduce you to her is because I have been one of the loudest voices that keeps saying there are no more moderate Democrats, especially the Jewish Democrats sitting in Congress for years. They vote down the line with every progressive legislation that the Biden administration has produced, including many that are not helpful to American Jews. Jews are joining the Republican Party in record numbers, even more than in 2020. Joining us now is one of those Jews, Melissa Toomim. She is running in California's 32nd district. She's running against Brad Sherman, once an outspoken activist who actually acted on words supporting Israel But his votes during the last few years have not been so pro-Israel, and he has been one who has never called out the squad for legislation discipline the way they call out Republicans. So, Melissa, thank you for joining Cindy's Political Corner.
Thank you, Cindy. I'm really honored to be here, and I'm excited to meet your audience and get my message out, because you're absolutely right. We don't have any moderate Democrats left in Congress, and the Jewish members of Congress, who are all Reform Jews like myself. I'm like seventh generation Reform. My family joined the Reform movement in Germany long before they moved to the United States in the 1850s. But the current Democrats in Congress are standing shoulder to shoulder with the Muslim Brotherhood representatives who want to kill us all. It's just that simple.
You're absolutely right. And you just brought up another great point that I always tell people. There is this idea around the world that religious Jews are all Republican and non-religious Jews are all Democrat. You are seventh generation Reformed Jew. You are not an observant Sabbath observer. You don't have, family doesn't wear yarmulkes everywhere, but you are a proud Zionist and a proud Jew. And many more Reformed and conservative Jews that are proud of their Jewish identity are joining our party. Tell us a little bit. Your name Toomim, first of all, has a great Hebrew background, its meaning, and its background in Jewish history. Tell us a little bit about the name Toomim.
So Toomim is usually heard as part of a phrase, Urim Vatumim, light and truth. And the Toomim, so in ancient times, in the temple of King Solomon, the original great temple for Israel, actually I think it was Judah, where the temple is. The high priest in the Holy of Holies wore these breastplates, and the breastplates had pockets in them for these tokens, the Urim and the Toomim. The Urim, light. When they would cast the Urim, that meant a guilty verdict. When they would cast the Toomim, it meant a not guilty verdict. So Toomim means integrity, it means truth, it means innocence, or not guilty, as we say.
We couldn't ask for a better candidate with the name Toomim, because your project is something that is in the news, making headlines, because usually a presidency's credibility and strength is in foreign policy. President Biden has the lowest numbers of trust among Americans in his foreign policy, leading with his failure in Afghanistan. You are one of the most outspoken, not only voices, but activists actually doing something to help those stuck in Afghanistan. Please share with our audience the important work that you are doing.
I am actively trying to evacuate. I counted yesterday, I think it's 80 Afghans, though I think 10 of them are in Tajikistan already. But yeah, I've got all of these Afghan families that I'm trying to evacuate, who are extremely vulnerable. One of the families is Jewish. We heard in the news that the last Jew in Afghanistan had been evacuated. But it's just not true. He was just the most well-known Jew in Afghanistan because he lived at the synagogue in Kabul. But there is a whole community of Jews in another city. I won't even say what city that is.
Right. Please don't breach their security.
Yes, I don't want to breach their security. They are living as what we know as Marranos. They don't have that word, but we have that word because it handed down to us from Spanish and Portuguese Jews during the Inquisition. They were living as secret Jews, but publicly their neighbors didn't know they were still Jewish. And that's what Jews in Afghanistan are struggling through. So I'm trying to get one family of Jewish Afghans out. I'm trying to get families of Afghans who worked with the US military. I'm trying to get Afghans out who worked at high levels with the Afghan government and military, and a family law attorney who is specifically being threatened, and a women's rights activist, so and a young gay teenager. So the Taliban just wants to kill them all, and Islamic State is working hand in hand with them. So we got to get these people out.
So in California, you just had a recall. And of course, as much as people were trying to get rid of Gavin Newsom, they couldn't. And, you know, it's like the bookends, California and New York, and it seems to be the rest of the country is going red. Tell us what you see going on now in your campaign that is going to make a red wave in California.
Well, in my district, and well, really all over LA County, and lots of communities in LA County, particularly the most valuable real estate, like Santa Monica, Beverly Hills, West Hollywood, and places in the Valley and Malibu. There were riots here in 2020, and the lockdowns here are far more severe than they are in less valuable real estate locations. You know, so you won't find severe lockdowns in Arizona. You won't find severe lockdowns in Utah, but in Los Angeles, in San Francisco, in Portland, and Seattle, and Chicago, and New York, and in London, London and Paris, right? So every place in the world that's the most valuable real estate, that's where the most severe lockdowns are happening, and people can't live here. They can't earn a living. Their businesses are being shut down. And when they're allowed to reopen, these mandates are making it so that 40% of the population that's not vaccinated can't even patronize your business if you go along with the mandates, because they want to shut down small businesses. They want to kill the economies here so they can just scoop up the real estate.
So you're talking about the Hollywood area, which is so liberal and so many Jews. How do you plan to win them over?
Well, you know, the Jewish community is this is the business community, and it's also the entertainment community in the San Fernando Valley and on the coast, which is where my district is that I'm running. And the entertainment community, the entertainment industry, we are hemorrhaging entertainment business in Los Angeles. People are fleeing, just like people, I said, the small businesses are shutting down, and people are fleeing to Texas, to Nashville, to Atlanta. The entertainment industry is fleeing to Atlanta and Nashville and Dallas because they can't operate here, because the vaccine mandates, because the lockdown mandates, because the high taxation, because the woke culture that won't accept anything that colors outside of the lines of what they consider acceptable speech. Our industry is dying, and I want to rely on the First Amendment to revive the entertainment industry because we need to have freedom of thought and freedom of speech in order to have a creative, competitive entertainment industry.
When you get elected, what will be your top 3 priorities?
Reviving the entertainment industry, making it so that vaccine mandates cannot happen. So they can't try to impose these on us again in the future by adding amendments to the Civil Rights Act, amending the Equal Employment Opportunity Act, the Fair Housing Act, the act establishing the Department of Education, making it so that vaccine status is a protected class rather than an excuse for discrimination. That's high on my list. I'm working closely with Robert F. Kennedy's group, Children's Health Defense, to make that happen.
So you're open to working bipartisan. You're working on issues and common sense versus R versus D, which I think is the way Republicans are going to win in 2022.
I agree. I agree. I believe that we are in an era beyond labels. That R versus D is not really the issue anymore. It's it's humanity. It's protecting our communities and allowing people to have differences of opinion, because as Jews, argument is a key part of our culture.
That's right.
And we argue not because we dislike each other, but we argue to find the truth.
Correct.
Because
It's a great way to say it. I always tell people when we do shidduchs, matchmaking, that God does not want you exactly like the mate. He wants you with the mate that you can grow from and learn with, so that you appreciate each other. And you just said that so beautifully. One of our listeners wants to know a little bit about your background, how you
okay.
became a congressional candidate. What did you do before this?
Well, before this, so I was doing investigative reporting on Afghanistan for many years and uncovered corruption that was driving our policy with regard to Afghanistan. It turns out that Charlie Wilson and James A. Baker, a Democrat and a Republican, were both invested in a Pakistani oil field. And from there, I went and got a master's degree in nonproliferation and terrorism. I did my master's thesis on the propaganda tactics of the Muslim Brotherhood, because how propaganda is used to manipulate the public meshed with my entertainment background as a writer and an actress. So I understood how they were using phrases to manipulate people emotionally. And so from there, I uncovered how the congressman that represents Santa Monica, Ted Lieu, was involved with the Muslim Brotherhood. He was doing stuff to support them all the time, and I couldn't have that man representing me. So I volunteered year before last for the man who was running against him. And then last year I decided, okay, I'm going to run myself. I have to just step up. I can't wait for other people to do this.
Well, we thank you so much. Let me ask you a question. How can our audience reach out to you, donate to your campaign? Obviously, you are new to politics. You're in a hard district, not an impossible district. And if everybody who believes in the common sense issues that you're running on wants to help you out, sending even $10, $18 high, tell us, where can they write to you? Where can they send
They,
you?
they can go to toomimforcongress.com, and that's Toomim, the number 4, congress.com, and donate at my website. And they will see my positions on the entertainment industry that I just described. They'll see my position on immigration. I believe in managed immigration. Immigrants, look, we are, unless we're Native Americans, we're all the children of immigrants. But even, the doors weren't wide open at the end of the 19th century. People had to go through Ellis Island. They had to qualify. And that's what it's about. It's just about making sure that people who want to come here are going to be loyal American citizens. They're going to love the Constitution like I do.
I couldn't agree with you more. Couldn't agree with you more there.
So toomimforcongress.com. TOOMIM.
I have 2 quick questions that are simple answers. This week, it's been coming out all over the news about all the money that Nancy Pelosi, your fellow Californian, has been making with insider trading and with her family and what's allowed in Congress. And now people are introducing bills about this. What is your feeling on that? And what is your feeling on term limits?
Well, I never really approved of term limits, because I think that elections actually are, that's supposed to be the limit, right? And if someone is doing a good job, I think they should be allowed to continue doing a good job as long as the public approves of them. The problem we have is that there's so much money backing these incumbents that it's no longer about what the public thinks. The public's will, the will of the American people, is being thwarted. And people like Nancy Pelosi and Dianne Feinstein and and Brad Sherman and Ted Lieu, these people have huge money behind them. I mean, my opponent has $8 million in the bank. And that's just what's showing on his FEC reports.
Not to mention what they're all making in their inside trading and inside
Yeah.
dealings and knowing what's going on.
Yeah, well, not, it used to be, I remember a story from Richard J. Daley when he was a new, like, I think he was just a member of the city council in Chicago. And I think it was his predecessor, Thompson, Mayor Thompson, said to him, "Don't take the money, give him your business card." So they find ways around the old fashioned, you don't take an envelope full of cash anymore. You give them your business card. So you're a member of a law firm and they send the money to the law firm. And as a member of the law firm, you're getting millions in fees. It's just, they have all kinds of ways around it. And Nancy Pelosi is making millions off of China and off of Visa card. And we need people in Congress and in the state legislatures and in the city councils, that are honest, that are there just to work for the people.
That's a great way to end this segment. Melissa Toomim, please keep the fight. We're with you all the way. And we are going to have you back again on Cindy's Political Corner. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, everybody.
Welcome back to Cindy's Political Corner. I am your host, Cindy Gross, and joining us is a friend to the show. He's been here before. He made headlines this week. He actually called upon the need to question, should the FBI be disbanded, especially after what happened in his own home state of Texas. And a pro-Israel Zionist, he is very upset with the initial reaction that the FBI made and said about this not being an anti-Semitic attack. Grant Stinchfield, host of Newsmax's Stinchfield and syndicated radio host, you are always welcome here, and thanks for joining us.
Oh, well, Cindy, it's great to be with you. Look, I went beyond just asking the question. I think the FBI needs to be disbanded and it needs to be rebuilt under another name, under new leadership, because right now the FBI is not focused on protecting American citizens. It's focused on waging political warfare on what the Democrats consider as enemies, which is people like you, parents out there that are upset with the way the country's going, and certainly Republicans in Washington and beyond. And so they dropped the ball on this issue with this terrorist who went into this synagogue in Colleyville. And I'm steaming mad over it. They're too focused on January 6th and prosecuting grandmas and grandpas who went for an unorganized tour through the Capitol than they are worried about catching terrorists.
Well, as a Jew, I am not surprised at the rise in anti-Semitism like this, because let's face it, so many Jewish people, including the rabbi and many of the congregants in that very temple, support Black Lives Matter, support inclusion of everybody before securing themselves, and of course, did not vote for President Donald Trump in 2020, even though Donald Trump was the best president for Israel and for American Jews maybe ever in the history of our country.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Look, in the end, victims are victims. Now, victims can do things to prevent themselves from becoming a victim. And certainly law enforcement has an obligation to try to do what it can to prevent someone from becoming a victim. So anytime you have any kind of criminal activity, tragedy, terrorist activity, usually it's a series of events that lead up to what ultimately happens. And in this case, it was taking the hostages of these people in the synagogue. But where was Department of Homeland Security? They should have known about this guy. MI5 in England knew that this guy had a long history of violence. His brother said he had a history of mental illness. How was he not stopped coming over here? How did he get a firearm? And then you go to, why did they just let him in? Now, I know that pastors, rabbis, someone knocks on your door, just about every one of them that I know, you let in. But still, you've got to be ready for anything. You let somebody in, you've got to be prepared that that guy could be an evildoer, because evil exists in the world, as they learned at that synagogue. So a lot of failures here that led up to this. But clearly, I think the FBI really, really dropped the ball. And then to claim that they don't know what the motive is, at the same time, this terrorist is demanding the release of a woman that goes by the name of Lady Al Qaeda. She's serving 86 years for trying to organize the shooting of military officers in Afghanistan.
Worse, the FBI is trying to take credit that they actually rescued the hostages when, if you listen to any of the rabbis' interviews, what actually happened is it was a fluke. He was able to, like, I think, throw a chair at a door or something, and they escaped that way. So it had nothing to do with the competency of the FBI. But then again, look at the rest of our law enforcement. Look at our attorney general. January 6th is more important than this. I mean, we still don't have any answers as to who killed Ashley Babbitt. Well, we do, but why is he allowed to be walking the streets and getting medals when so many questions are still unanswered about what went on?
Look, it took months to learn the identity of that officer who shot and killed an unarmed woman in the Capitol. Just over the weekend, we heard about this 24-year-old girl in Los Angeles, California, murdered in a high-end furniture store by a deranged lunatic who was out on bond for $1,000 for some misdemeanor case in Los Angeles. In South Carolina, he was out on bond for shooting at a vehicle. They let him go for shooting at a vehicle. Now you consider you got January 6th protesters that are in prison for over a year now, some in solitary confinement, and they're locked up. Talk about Democrat hypocrisy. If this violent criminal in Los Angeles was locked up as he should have been, that young woman would be alive today. But this is what we face. The hypocrisy that the Democrats are offering up is getting Americans killed.
And of course, they're threatening with the filibuster if we don't go along with them.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm glad that Joe Manchin, Kristen Sinema, the two Democrats, one from West Virginia, one from Arizona, stood up, blocked the filibuster from going through this election rigging scheme that Democrats had offered up. I don't agree with anything on them politically. Joe Manchin did make a statement, though, about what the right thing to do is, and I honestly do believe the man's sincere about that. But make no mistake, he's not a moderate. He would have voted for this legislation, but he saved the filibuster because he felt strongly about the rules that have been in place for hundreds of years.
So I watch a show, of course, every night, and I saw some of your guests, and I've actually, followed through social media. There's been a lot of reaction to your call to disband the FBI, and some is quite surprising. Tell us some of the response you've had directly.
Well, from most conservatives I talk to, when they look at the FBI and its history with orchestrating this Russian collusion hoax against President Trump, you could take it all the way back to 9/11, where their intelligence failures to stop that attack from happening. You've got the Fort Hood shooter. Fort Hood shooter was a Muslim extremist who infiltrated the United States military. They called it an act of workplace violence. So this is a long history of the FBI playing politics with this stuff. Just about every conservative that I've heard of either agrees with me that it should be disbanded, or they say it needs to be investigated, send in an inspector general, revamp it. But in the end, something needs to happen. Now, liberals on the left want to ignore this story. Many of them don't respond, to the ones that do just call me names. But that's what liberals do.
Well, I'll be honest with you. I am tired of that reports. All it does is wasting taxpayers' time and dollars, and it gives elected officials excuses to just do nothing and get full paychecks. The best example, I'm still waiting for the Durham report really to come out with all the details of everything, that everybody was expecting. We're still waiting for all the reports about still the Clinton emails, and now she's the front runner for 2024.
Right.
People don't want any more of this nonsense going on. They are so turned off to Washington. And I think that's why 2022 and 2024 are the year of the primaries. You're going to see people voting for who they want, not who their party tells them to. And I also see 2024 could be Republican victory.
Absolutely. Providing we get this election rigging scheme under control. And when I talk about an election rigging scheme, I mean weaponizing the China virus for a mass mail-in ballot situation where everybody gets ballots. You don't even have to fill them out yourself. The Democrats will send people to your homes to pick them up. They'll help you fill them out. Heck, there's been reports of some people filling them out for them. Then you've got boxes to drop them off in all over the place. There's no way we can win, because the sad reality is, in America, we as patriotic Americans who value hard work, value passion about where we want this country headed, we are outnumbered by lazy Americans. Lazy Americans typically didn't make their way to the polls. That was a benefit to us because they didn't have any engagement with where this country was headed. But now you can sit on your mom's couch and play video games, and somebody's going to come to your house, grab your ballot for you, fill it out and take it and turn it in. We'll never win another election again. That's what this election rigging scheme at a federal level was about. And sadly, it's still happening at state levels across the country.
Well, your friend, President Trump, was quick to point out that during Biden's press conference, he kind of alluded to maybe 2020 wasn't so truthful as we think. And sure enough, Trump sent out an email. We all know that you do have a good relationship with him. Tell us what you think about where he is in his mind with candidates and with 2024.
So I was lucky enough to have an opportunity to spend just a few minutes with the president a few weeks ago over the holidays. And though he has not told me whether he's running, I have a good feeling that he is. When he talks to me about what he hopes and the messages that he'd like me to push, it feels like I'm talking to a candidate who wants to run. So I'm hopeful that he does. And I think President Trump learned some lessons from his last time in office. You know, he always talked about the deep state, but I think he learned now just how powerful the deep state actually is and just how ingrained they are into the swamp we call Washington. And so I think he'll be better prepared to root them out. And the moment he senses someone as part of the deep state, to get rid of them. Because if you notice now under the Biden administration, we don't see any leaks. You remember how many leaks we would see coming out of the White House, how many leaks we would see coming out of these agencies? We don't see any leaks anymore, which is proof that these are all Democrats. They're Democrat operatives that are working as government bureaucrats, and they're working to hurt conservative Americans like President Trump and those who support him.
And there's still plenty in the Republican Party, Republican state and county leaderships and county committee members. I'm hearing it from candidates all over the country that they are Trump supporters. They realize this is a revolution. You saw what happened last week in Arizona. He's coming to your state in Texas. Are you going to be at the rally?
You know, where is it? I don't know where the rally is. Where do you know where it is?
It's at the end of the month. I'll get you the information.
All right. If it's in Dallas, I'll be there. If it's in, Texas is a huge state. Sometimes there's parts of Texas that'll take me 10 hours to get to. So, but I always love going to those rallies. I was just when he came to Dallas with Bill O'Reilly. I was there, and I try to get to his events anytime I can.
Well, we all would love to be at them. I mean, and luckily your station Newsmax airs them where other quote unquote right-wing television stations are not airing them and not sharing them. So we really appreciate the fact that your station recognizes that this movement is here to stay.
You know, when you look at his rally that was in Arizona last week, the ratings on Newsmax were through the roof. It's unbelievable how many people tune in. And then you look at the crowds that he's pulling, where Joe Biden can't fill a shoebox. He could be offering free car washes at his honk your horn rallies. People still don't show up to them. And but they do to President Trump. And as he mentioned, what did he get? 15 million more votes than he did the first time around and still lost. So I think that that there will be a sea of change to come soon, God willing.
I love watching your show because you are an investigative journalist and you try to have different stories than running the same stories that everybody else does. What's upcoming? What can you share?
Well, we're going to talk a little bit tonight about this push, as you mentioned, where the Democrats are now talking about, since they didn't get their vote rigging scheme passed, that there could be fraud in the 2022 election on behalf of Republicans, which is absolutely projecting, gaslighting, trying to flip the script. I mean, it's amazing to me. But what do they do here with this argument? And this is what we're going to talk about tonight. They claim that Donald Trump offers up the big lie about a stolen election. Well, the first person to offer up the big lie was Hillary Clinton. Then they're going to offer her up to run against Donald Trump. Well, that negates the only argument they have against him, which is this big lie. And now they're going to start claiming there's a big lie for 2022. So that totally takes any of their arguments away from Donald Trump, which shows you just how dumb they are as Democrats.
Well, we're running out of time. Please share with the audience where they can reach out to you, and of course, your radio show, the TV show.
Well, I hope everybody follows me on social media, Stinchfield 1776. That's Stinchfield 1776. Of course, you can find me on Newsmax, 8 p.m. Eastern time, Monday through Friday on Newsmax. Every cable network has it, and also streaming. So if you have any kind of Roku device, you name it, even just going to Newsmax TV, it's free to watch. And then, of course, AM 870 in Los Angeles, that has an app as well. You can listen nationwide. The Morning Answer, AM 870, and that's 9 to 12 Eastern time, 6 to 9 California time.
Grant Stinchfield, you're always welcome on Cindy's Political Corner. Thank you so much, and keep those headlines because everybody is talking about you.
Well, Cindy, you're a great patriot. We appreciate your fight as well.
Thank you. Welcome back to this very special episode. And as you know, I'm a proud Jew, I'm a proud Zionist, and I happen to be a daughter-in-law of a living Holocaust survivor. And my own background is quite unique in regards to a Holocaust survivor. So I am really proud and honored to bring to you Rachel Shnay. Rachel is the voice of the future of Holocaust education and making sure that nobody ever experiences what her family did through the Holocaust. She's going to tell you she is on the board of so many Jewish organizations, and she is the face of the Mazel ring that is going around the world internationally, that I wanted to bring her on to discuss her work in regard to keeping Holocaust education alive and making sure that Jews and non-Jews know the facts about the Holocaust. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Cindy. Amazing. I remember the first time I met you at the Yad Vashem luncheon.
Correct. So tell us now, you are very involved with Young Leadership Yad Vashem. Tell us exactly your title there and what you do, because it's more than just a title. You are involved in every event they handle. You do book readings with them, etc. So tell us your title there, and of course with Wezo.
So I'm very honored to be the co-chair of the American Society of Yad Vashem Young Leaders Associates for several years now. I've been involved, I mean, my family's been involved forever, but I took on this role as the young leader co-chair about 3 or 4 years ago. And then I'm also the co-chair of the global WITSO, which is the Women's International Zionist Organization, Aviv. So it's women under 40 for the most part, all over the world. So I co-chair that with my friend in Miami, Shanna, and we're the USA representatives. So we basically run missions and we do all these things for Israel. So I'm kind of doing both at the same time. So both of those roles came to me at the same time. I couldn't say no. So it's been quite the ride. And then I run a business. So yeah.
And you really started the business recently, within the past couple of years, and it has just been booming.
It's crazy. So I was working on the business for a full year before I launched the website, and I officially launched September 2019. So right a few months before COVID hit. And one of my inspiration, obviously my mother had a business, so I kind of grew up with it. I never thought I'd be in the jewelry business. I was doing a ton of other careers before this. I'm a classic middle child, as they say. And I actually have my master's in Jewish education. I was teaching secular Jewish kids in Manhattan who didn't go to Jewish school. Instead of them going to after school Hebrew school, I would teach them Torah, Hebrew, teach them for their bar and bat mitzvahs. And that kind of just took off. But it was very fulfilling, but it wasn't what I really felt like was my purpose. So as much as that is such an incredible field and much needed, especially for secular kids that are in secular school, this kind of fell in my lap, and I wanted to create a jewelry line that not only was affordable and relatable, but one of my main focuses is the Mazel collection. In addition to everything else, I sell everything.
And for our non-Jewish audience, Mazel means luck.
Mazel, yeah, exactly. People, it's kind of, it's a lot of different words combined. The mazel, your energy, your luck, your whatever. So I created the mazel ring, which is the Magen David, and it kind of just blew up. I had no idea this was going to happen. I think people love jewelry that has meaning to it and is purposeful and something that they can just look at and just admire and know that it represents something greater than themselves and it's not just diamonds and gold. And when I started the line and I launched the website, I knew that I wanted to have something like this in the collection. So I created this collection, and 10% of the proceeds from the entire Mazel collection, so that's like including any of these items, the chai and all the different Magen Davids that we have here, goes directly to My Soldier, which is an organization in Israel, where the money just goes directly to soldiers in need, whatever they need. There's no in between. So I actually have, when I'm in Israel, I go and I give them what they need, packages and pay their rent, whatever it is, it all comes from these sales. But for me, why I started the Mazel collection was I am a granddaughter of 4 Holocaust survivors. And that has been something that's ingrained in me since I can't even, it's like, I remember the minute I learned how to speak, I knew what the Holocaust was. So it was just in my blood. And I actually, to the point where I thought all elderly people had accents, because the only elderly people I knew were survivors. So when I met one of my friends with an American grandparent, I couldn't believe it. I literally turned to her. I'm like, what do you mean your grandparent doesn't have an accent? Like, all grandparents have accents. So I had a big aha moment when I was 8 or 9 years old, when I realized that it wasn't everyone wasn't like me, and not everyone grew up with survivors, which I feel so fortunate. And I think they're the most incredible generation. And so much of who I am and what I represent and what I live for is because of that generation. So the Mazel collection took this Magen David that the Nazis had used as a symbol to make us feel ashamed and embarrassed and degraded and just dehumanized us, because as long as we had that badge of, the star or the armband, it was something that we did not want to be associated with, of course, because it meant death. So for the Nazis to take a symbol that was so sacred and holy to us and to turn it into something like that, I wanted to reverse that. Obviously, it's obviously been reversed. It's not just me that's doing this, but for my generation, I wanted it to be something cool that people wanted to wear a Magen David necklace or ring. And honestly, for me growing up, it wasn't the cool thing to do. And so I kind of ran with it, and thank Hashem, thank God, it's been crazy. Because I remember even the first time I had to invest a good amount of money to create them and to buy a lot of them. And my mom, even, I love her now, she's a big supporter of the Mazel ring, but at the beginning she's like kind of nervous. She's like, I don't know, like, how are you going to sell all these? Like, it's a commitment, and it's a risk. And it went crazy. I worked
And every
really
major Jewish influencer,
yeah.
actresses. I mean, you just had Deborah Messing up in your office, and of
Deborah
course,
Messing was here a few minutes ago, and it was crazy. She found me from Instagram, which was it's also very, it's like such an amazing feeling that people can just find you from social media. And, it wasn't a connection that got us together. It just happened. And it was such an amazing moment for me today. In addition to Miss Universe having it,
I was just going to say, you just were in Israel, you handed it to Miss Universe. But I really want to talk today because we are here and you are such a vocal young voice about the Holocaust.
Right.
What your organization does that stands out among other, not that other Holocaust organizations aren't important, but you are bringing together children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren now of Holocaust survivors so that their stories are never forgotten. And just talk a little bit about it, because you do represent a very, very unique crowd with unique experiences to share.
Right. So again, like, I created this line and I'm so fortunate for it. But like you said, my favorite thing about my career right now is that I have this platform because of my jewelry to talk about activism, Israel advocacy, and fight against anti-Semitism, and my passion, which is Holocaust education and awareness. And I just think it is it makes me cry to think about the fact that we aren't going to have the survivors with us in a very short amount of time. And the fact that my future children won't have the survivors around them the way I had survivors around me. It was such a huge part of my life and my parents' life that
Give us an example of like what was
crazy.
like a
It
unique,
makes me
unique day.
emotional just talking about it. It just, my grandparents were the most incredible people ever. And it's just unfathomable to think that what they went through and then how they came to whatever country they went to. Because one of my grandfathers, whose unveiling is actually this weekend in Miami, I'm going for, he was an Auschwitz survivor from Lodz. He was the youngest of 7 boys, and his father was the rabbi or the head of kashrut in Lodz, in the Lodz ghetto where he was from. And my grandfather, his name is Simcha Horowitz, he was forced to check in to the center of the town, which they actually did this, and you can like read about it. They made people write their names and check in. He was 10 years old and he was forced to watch his father be hanged by the Nazis. And I just, it's just the craziest thing when you think about it. He then went on to Auschwitz. He lost 4 of his brothers, his parents. When he survived, he only wanted to go to Israel. He only wanted to fight for the independence of Israel. He went on Aliyah Bet to then Palestine. He joined the Haganah, and there's a few photographs of him in Yad Vashem, him coming off the boat, him in the crowd. There's a very famous photograph in Tel Aviv, when the UN partitioned the state of Israel in November 1947, and he's in the crowd with his arm up, raising his arm up, and it's just the most incredible photograph. And I have it, I can't show you because it's like literally huge on my wall, but I stare at it every day, and I sit at my desk and I stare at that photo and I look at these survivors. They're teenagers that just lost their entire lives, everything even their own names. And they have these crazy big smiles on their faces. They have waving the Israeli flag, and it's a miracle. You can't explain anything other than that. So all of my grandparents went on and of course built beautiful lives, very difficult lives. Nobody ever, people see the big pictures of like the grandchildren and the great grandchildren, and it's so beautiful and everything's great, but no, everything's not great. Their lives were tormented day and night. They had nightmares every single night. They lost their families. They lost everything. They lost their childhood. They didn't have an education. They came to these countries with not speaking the language, without a dollar, without anything. And so many of them, it's incredible to see how they did build successful careers. And they got no help from anyone. They didn't have parents. They didn't have in-laws. They didn't have help from the government. They had nothing. So it's just crazy to see.
It's something to be honored and looked at so
100%.
much.
And I don't think that our generation, obviously we have everything handed to us. And I'm not even about money wise. I'm talking about like just living in this generation,
You have your parents and all the comforts around you.
Exactly. And it doesn't matter if you come from a lower class, higher, whatever it is, everyone has the basic needs to live a good life. So it's just, it's crazy that, that this generation is going to be gone and we're not going to have them to talk to and just inspire us. So I take it to heart. I really take it. It's such a, like, I feel it in my bones and in my heart and in my soul. And when I think about a survivor, talk to a survivor, I start getting emotional because maybe I'm just so connected to them on a soul level, but I don't know. Sometimes I get very frustrated with our generation, especially those who don't have a family member that's connected to the Holocaust, that they don't want to go to Yad Vashem when they go to Israel. It's too depressing, or why should I waste the whole day doing something that's going to make me cry, that's going to make me upset, that's going to give me nightmares? And I get so angry, and we'll be at a Shabbos table anywhere talking, or just talking to anyone, and they tell me they haven't been to Yad Vashem, and I'm like, what do you mean you've never been to Yad Vashem? Like, I hate to say this, but I judge people that have never been to Yad Vashem, or that do not care enough to learn about their family's history, or their whoever, their people. Doesn't have to be their family. And I think that it's every single young person's responsibility to take the time to learn about the Holocaust, to teach the Holocaust, to make sure that it's in their education system, wherever their children are in school, to where whatever college school classes they're in, to make sure that it's being taught in the correct manner, not to just be reading the boy in the striped pajamas. So that's what gets me really heated.
Well, I can't agree with you more. And I remember you in college starting petitions when things were not fair for the Jewish students. Rachie, Shnay, thank you so much for joining Cindy's Corner, and we will share the information of where people can reach you. Rachie works with Jews and non-Jews on educating about the Holocaust to make sure classrooms are teaching facts and not opinion.
And the most important thing right now is to get a survivor into your school, into your home, into your synagogue, wherever you, into your church, wherever you are. You got to get the survivors right now, because we're not going to have them for so much longer. So we can help you with that.
Thank you so much. And may we have a lot of mazel from you for years to come.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cindy.
Keep it moving now, can't you see? Keep it moving away from me. Keep it moving now, down near me. Keep moving out the door now. Keep it moving now, can't you see? Keep it moving away from me. Keep it moving now, down near me. Keep moving out the door now. Getting really sick of you. Hypocritic attitude. Know what the hell you gonna do when I let people know the truth now? Maybe didn't realize you shake to see in lies. Fighting for justice, yeah. You choose friends by how much that they keep it moving now, can't you see? Keep it moving away from me. Keep it moving now, down near me. Keep moving out the door now. Keep it moving now, can't you see? Keep it moving away from me. Keep it moving out, down near me. Keep moving out the door now. See, stand strong and believe in our own community. And how dare I protest that we keep giving away our best? Seems like we kiss ass, but then we call it progress. And that I only wanna see this trickery going unbelievably. Can't see what I see. Keep it moving now, can't you see? Keep it moving away from me. Keep it moving now, down near me. Keep moving out the door now. Keep it moving now, can't you see? Keep it moving away from me. Keep it moving out, down near me. Keep moving out the door. Keep it moving now, can't you see? Keep it moving away from me. Keep it moving out, down near me. Keep moving out the door now. Keep it moving now, can't you see?